All right, we are recording. This is Matt Cropp with the Vermont Employee Ownership Center. It is the 20th of March, 2020, and this is the Cooperative Vermont kind of COVID-19 crisis response call. Put the word out to some co-op folks, and we're going to have a few updates on key fronts that will hopefully be useful for our broader co-op community here, with the caveat that this is obviously a quickly changing situation, and there's lots lots could be different in a few days, but this is kind of, to the best of our knowledge, kind of where things are standing right now. So I'll start for a quick round of introductions, just personally, who you are, what organization you're with, maybe 5 or 10 seconds of anything individually you'd like to share before we dive into the agenda building. So maybe Mark, do you want to go first?
Oh, sure. Mark Saunders from Dunkiel Saunders in Burlington. And we work with a number of cooperative businesses in throughout Vermont. And worked with Matt on a variety of things over the years. And when he had sent this invite out, my colleague Nico and I were just interested in hearing what people's concerns are. We're certainly hearing things from our clients, and so we're still sort of assessing how to deal with the vast array of things that are popping up.
Thank you. Kevin, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm Kevin McAllister, founder, managing partner of Catamount Solar, based in Randolph. We're a workers cooperative with about 16 employees currently, 9 of whom are employee owners. Everything is changing very quickly. One of the bigger challenges that has just hit us is Green Mountain Power announced yesterday they are no longer doing any non-essential line work, and so any of our jobs, to the extent that we have them, that need transformers or other line work, we have no idea when they can get connected. So it's just almost insult to injury, frankly.
Thanks for sharing, Kevin. Lane, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Lane Fury with the Cooperative Fund of New England. I'm going to talk more about it as an agenda item. So I'm based in Barre, Vermont. I don't need to really share more right now.
All right, and Nico. Oh, you're muted.
Okay, sorry about that. Nico Lustig here. I work with Mark at Dunkiel Saunders. I'm an associate attorney, and like Mark said, we're joining just really out of concern for our community and out of interest to hear what's happening with the cooperatives in Vermont, and then to provide some resources or considerations as we move forward in these uncertain times.
Great. All right, so on just admin stuff for the conversation, I'm happy to sort of be in facilitator mode, or if someone else wants to take that, I'd be happy to take notes on the document. So do I volunteer for either of those roles?
I can support in note-taking here. Just
okay.
Swap it.
Great.
Yeah.
And I've got it kind of both in front of me. So if you're talking, I'll jump on for you.
Great.
All right. Great. And I see Simeon has joined. Simeon, just so you know, we are recording, so we can send this to other folks in the local co-op community. But do you want to just give a brief hello and intro?
Sure. If my audio stuff has worked out, great. So hi, I'm Simeon Chapin. I'm the Community Impact Officer at VSCCU. Sorry I'm late to the call, just came off of another one. Currently, like everybody else, moving to home office, and lots of meetings just like this one. Meaning, in terms of the technology aspect of it. Not every meeting that I'm in is this much cooperation.
All right, so moving on to agenda building, the items I have are kind of a round of check-ins, a little more deeply, just if anyone wants to share about how COVID is impacting your organization, maybe keeping it to 1 to 2 minutes, kind of overview on that front. Then an update from Lane at Cooperative Fund of New England, about sort of what CFNE as a sort of lender to a lot of the co-ops in our region, kind of what they're seeing and what their sort of response thus far is. And then Nico has done some research to give us a little update on what at this point in the game, again, it's a rapidly changing situation. We need to know about, or we should know about, you know, the kind of legal changes that are and legislative changes that are afoot. I'll speak briefly to the sort of relief grant fund thing that I mentioned in the email that I sent out. Then I just have sort of a placeholder item for any sort of brainstorming of what activities might be worthwhile to engage in going forward, and kind of the question of whether we should do a follow-up meeting. Are there any other things people would like to add to that list? Hearing none, yeah, so let's do just kind of the little bit more in-depth check-in about, you know, just for each organization how this is impacting. So Kevin, you kind of started and told us a little bit about, you know, the sort of situation with your solar installations getting shut down or being delayed. Are there other things that are immediately on your plate that it would be good to not have others understand?
Well, the other than the phone has stopped ringing, it's kind of a big one. We actually have we have some jobs. We're actually in a somewhat fortunate position because we're sort of right-sized to weather a downturn for a while. We're hoping not to have to lay people off immediately. We have several jobs that are completely outside jobs, like away from you know, they're non-residential, and so people don't have to freak out about, you know, contact. Everyone is healthy so far, which is great. Everybody seems to be with the program in terms of staying healthy and social distancing. Office people are working from home. Field people are driving singly in vehicles and hopefully keeping their distance and cleaning their way out of other people's spaces. But the mostly solar is a discretionary expense for people. People aren't spending money. It's really, you know, like everything, it's totally uncertain on the economic front. It's worrying.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for sharing that, Kevin. Simeon, do you wanna go next?
Sure. So via CCU, you know, we engaged our pandemic preparedness plan. You know, there was a lot of emergency planning that was happening last year, which set us up in a pretty good position to have a kind of protocol in place to manage big events like this. So we have moved pretty quickly to move, you know, a large majority of our back office staff to remote work, sending them all home, and took the motion yesterday to close our branches close the lobby access at the end of the day. So, and this is all consistent. Let me back up a second. We've our entire Q2 goal is health and safety of our members and our staff, and managing a balance sheet through a financial and health crisis. So yeah, we've just closed down lobby access. We're still serving membership through all of our online channels, all of our remote channels, including video teller service at the branches and drive-through. And all of our staff that are that were frontline member-facing service are being redeployed to support those other channels. So everyone's employed, everyone's sticking together. We've also been able to put out additional paid time off for people who are needing to not work because of having children at home or taking care of a loved one who's sick, and do that triage at home. So we're pretty good for our staff that way. In terms of membership, we're getting lots of calls, people trying to come in and either take out a bunch of money when they are looking to try to have liquid capital at home. We're recommending that people leave it in the credit union because we're keeping access out and keeping access available, and it's not a very safe thing to do to have large sums of cash in your house. We are rolling out, well, we're waiting to hear what's going on with the SBA and all of the funding which is coming out, because we're getting lots of inquiry from our business members about what we can do for them. So we're actively, watching that and having preliminary phone calls with folks to see, well, what they need, so that when the money comes, we're able to move quickly. For members, individual members, we rolled out a member emergency loan, which is to cover approximately 2 weeks of salary for medium income. So it's a $2,000 loan written at, I think the price just dropped to 3.99. And we're working to find other sources of capital to help make that reach farther, and also be able to open it up to new membership, to be able to write up to 3 loans for that purpose at a low cost, to get people having cash flow when they need it. That's kind of where we're at.
Thank you, Simeon. Either Mark or Nico, do you want to say a little bit about what's going on with your all's organization?
Sure. So we've, I guess, finished our first week, or this is finishing our first week of working remotely. I think things have gone pretty smoothly. Like, most of us are accustomed to working remotely in addition to working in the office, just the nature of what we do and the hours we do it. So I think technologically we were set up pretty well, and we did make some steps to make sure not just the attorneys, but the support staff, the paralegals, and so on, were equipped to do that. One of the things we did just the other day was to have an all firm-wide teleconference, just to stay in touch, and we're going to do that periodically. Just on the notion of not just talking as you need to with the people you work with, but just all of us sort of staying in touch like we typically do when we're in the office, and just seeing everybody's face, and looking for encouragement or signs of panic as they might be out there. But I thought that went well, and I think we want to continue that, just to stay in touch. So we're certainly assessing how the business is going to be impacted, and and that's a lot. That's what our clients are doing, and we're hearing some people putting the brakes on certain things, just not wanting to proceed. Everybody worrying about liquidity, and so that's the changes keep coming in. But I'm sure, as lawyers always do, bad times bring work because of challenges that clients are facing in unexpected ways, or difficulties that they're having. So we're still trying to be on top of everything, and be as accessible as we were. It really doesn't matter that we're not physically in our offices, and then staying on top of all of the legal changes that are going on, because there's certainly a lot of things that are happening, and sort of uncertainty. A lot of things that we're you'll hear of a change to a law, but not all the details are worked out necessarily. What does it mean? How are things going to be implemented? So that's sort of a typical challenge we have, but maybe on a little faster pace these days.
Thank you, Mark. So maybe I'll go next, and then I'll take over notes for Lane, as Lane's see if any updates next on the agenda. So I wear a number of hats, so I'll start with the EOC one. is that we officially went to full remote work on Monday and have set the rule of only one person in our office per day, which is there's a little bit of irony here because we just shifted from 5 years of almost always working remotely into having an office, so now we're back to square one and feels like a little bit. But probably the big things on our agenda is so shifting some events online and really keeping an eye on our big annual conference happens in June, which as things have been changing, it's like maybe at the beginning of the week I was like 90% chance things will be back to normalcy by June 11th, and now it's like we should be contingency planning on this. So definitely sort of in the process. We have a board meeting next week that we'll do some, I think following that, we'll have a more clear sense of what that looks like. The other thing we've been giving some thought to is just how best to deploy some of our revolving loan fund to support businesses that are employee-owned businesses that are trying to bridge the gap. So that'll be another discussion that'll come up at our board meeting next week. The loan fund has about 115,000 in assets right now. We will want to keep some powder dry for potential conversions, but if there are useful ways that small chunks of that could be lent out or supplement other sorts of financing to help. We're kind of brainstorming on that front. So I mean, budget wise, we had like almost gotten an increase put into it was basically in process, and now of course the state budget is completely no one knows what's going on. So our assumption is that increase is probably not going to happen, but who knows. But we do have enough of a reserve that we're sort of in a place where we don't have to we can tighten belts a little bit and survive pretty well for over a year. So thanks to Don for being really miserly for all of those years and building up that reserve. Other things, one is I've been working on these real estate cooperative stuff that has been we successfully raised enough money for a down payment on a building and have that cash in the bank for the down payment, so that's good. But of course, the flip side is on one of them, it's launching 2 restaurant businesses in a time when restaurants are food service is clearly hard. So that's discussing potentially pushing back the closing and things like that. And then also just kind of thinking through what does a strategy look like for that sort of project in a down economic time. Are there maybe even opportunities that wouldn't be present in a high price real estate market? So we'll see how the economics of that plays. And then finally, the sort of Full Barrel project, which is connected, Full Barrel Cooperative. We've decided, we had a board meeting, called off our sort of outreach events for the next few months in person, and going forward are going to start having a virtual tap room every Friday for members to, after work, grab a beer. So after this call, I'll be hopping on that, popping a bottle of Switchback Humo. But so otherwise, that's kind of, just sort of being put in a holding pattern, since it's very much a conviviality-based organization, and in-person conviviality is kind of hard right now, right? So those are my updates. Lane, do you want to go ahead and sort of maybe both general check into how things are at CFNE, and then also what impact CFNE is having on your operations policies,
Right. Yeah, well, and I can start just off the bat. We're a regional organization that has been conducting business 100% remotely since inception. So in some ways, we've been really well prepared for this, which includes that I recently put together, it's funny to me that, not funny, but like a lot of people are not familiar with Zoom, and I live in Zoom all the time anyway. So I actually put together I'll start linking some things in these notes in a little bit, but like remote facilitation tips, because a lot of people have facilitation tools for in-person meetings, and just a few other ways of making these remote meetings move a little smoother for those who don't have experience running those. So we're well positioned in that term. And then also the Cooperative Fund of New England is pretty well financially positioned for this right now. We do have a pretty strong balance sheet to be able to support our portfolio borrowers should they be in need, and also are looking to be able to support co-ops in the region that are not current borrowers. So really looking to connect directly with both borrowers and non-borrowers. One thing that's really worth saying is that we work with any type of co-op business. So obviously this is hitting different sectors in really different ways. Our food co-ops are maxed out on the operations side of things, are not in a cash crunch per se, but are definitely working really hard to make sure that their employees and their customers are safe, and that they are actually able to fill shelves. You know, the product and supply chains are moving smoothly. So there's that side of things. Whereas our worker co-ops, a lot of folks like hearing from Kevin, just making some hard decisions about you know, what staffing's looking like and what the outlook is even for the businesses. And then our housing co-ops also are predominantly resident-owned communities, and so just knowing that a lot of those are low-income folks who are going to be hit pretty hard by this. So we're just really, at this point, interested in talking directly with businesses. We don't have any kind of, or all co-ops, we don't have any really blanket statements that we're offering yet. We do have a lot in development right now. And let's see, there were a couple of things I wanted to say about that. One is that we've put together a resource page that is linked from our home page. So there's a lot of business resources, a lot of housing co-op resources, general resources. So would direct folks there if you know you have clients who are interested in that, or if you have additional resources, feel free to send them my way. Our loan officers are really ready and willing to talk with any businesses, any worker-owned co-ops about cash flow management. And we have a co-op coach, Carolyn, who's based in Boston, but really has a lot of experience and is really ready to talk with folks too who may be in need. And then, gosh, there were so many more things I was going to say. We are in development. This is the big one of an emergency loan fund that we're looking to be ready to share more details about next week. I just, everything's still so in process that I can't give that information with any certainty right now, but also would just invite folks to reach out to me directly to hear about that as it develops if there's questions, and certainly are in communication also with the other co-op specific community development financial institutions regionally and nationally to be coordinating some of those efforts as well. Oh yeah, that was the other big piece that I was just going to say, is that the community development financial institutions have weathered really big economic and climate catastrophes in the past and are really well positioned to do so. And some of those reasons are because we're not regulated in the same way that other financial institutions are. And so we have a lot more flexibility in terms of payment deferral, things like that, because we don't have regulators who are going to be, you know, downrating our portfolio as a result of that or anything. So we're really ready to be flexible and work with our borrowers in whatever way. And that's sort of what this our organization is set up to do specifically. So are there any things that I didn't cover? Do people have questions specifically? I'm not sure if there's anything else to go into there. It's very much just like we're really looking to have a customized approach to each individual co-op's needs.
Lane, did I hear you say that you're working to help coordinate the response by CDFIs regionally? If you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, no, so I'm not working to coordinate, we're not working to coordinate a response regionally. It's more so that we're in direct connection with the other co-op loan funds that are also looking at emergency loan fund structure. So that's something that we've been connecting on. And I know that there's also another, I imagine you're on the list, but the New England Alternative Finance folks are also meeting early next week, which is just going to be another landing place, I think, for regional financial institutions to talk about how to coordinate response. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions for Lane? Well, thank you. That was very helpful. So it's next up we have Nico to give sort of an update on sort of what the current legal situation is.
So let's see, I'm not muted. Thank you. I'm glad to be able to share with you guys. I wanted to also just let you know, as a disclaimer, because I'm a lawyer, this is not legal advice and educational, but we're also working on putting together something at the firm that we could make available to people in the general public, and then also have as a available resource. So earlier this week, a group of the attorneys at the firm divided up some tasks to start researching, in particular, the implications, not just researching, but tracking changes that are happening in the law for areas that affect business contracts, employment considerations, which is really the biggest kind of topic at the moment, and then also to start paying attention to insurance policies, and in order to be able to guide our clients as well as our community in making wise legal decisions. So at the moment, what we have is really more like broad sweeping outline, and early next week, we're going to put together something that could be a bit more substantive. So just to dive into a little bit of the details, two big issues have drawn attention in the realm of contracts. One of the big questions is whether contracts are still able to be carried out, and if not, how will people running businesses or parties to these contracts be able to engage the legal notion of impossibility, such as whether the parties are able to perform due to these unforeseen circumstances. And in terms of that area of impossibility, there are quite a few limits. And it can't just be, oh, the government declared a state of emergency, or we've been put under loose instructions that people can't leave their homes or shouldn't leave their homes. But certain things like what's happening in California and Pennsylvania, where there are stay in place orders. So you physically can't have your employees coming to work, for example. Those kind of rise to that level of impossibility. So those are things that, again, we suggest seeking legal advice if you are in a contract and thinking about how to navigate whether you're going to have the service performed, or whether you're going to be able to perform those services. Or the same for whatever clients you're working with in terms of providing guidance to them with whether these loans or supply chains, or being able to just complete projects. The second major clause for contracts is force majeure, which is this older framework that's mostly used in weather-related or other kind of major catastrophes, pretty much unforeseeable, like events or acts that are well beyond the control of either party. A lot of older contracts don't include things like pandemics or epidemics or viruses or illnesses in them. After the and H1N1 and SARS, a lot of contracts started, like some contracts started putting in pandemics as part of the criteria. So that's something that's important to really just look at the terms of the contracts that you're in, especially if you're considering that the performance can't be performed or like may be delayed. That may in particular impact like whether the contract just is dismissed or void, or whether it comes to a point where deadlines have to be changed. So those are kind of the big things with contracts and business, and we'll be able to share more on that, as I said, next week. Let's see, employment's the big category that we've had the most interaction with so far this week. So I'll end with that one and skip right to insurance. like when in times of these circumstances, there are a few different types of insurance policies and claims that may be quite valuable to you or to the people that you're working with. For many commercial property insurance policies, there may be kind of clauses that are focused on business disruption or business interruption. It'll depend on the language, but they generally operate in the same way, which any kind of physical disruption that would prevent the business from operating the business may be able to file a claim to have insurance cover some of the losses. Again, with insurance, all of this is very fact specific on the particular legal instruments that you're working with and the contracts there. So it's important to actually review the specific language and speak to the insurance providers, especially if you're starting to think about certain contracts not being performed or certain events such as potential layoffs or other supply chain losses. So now, I mean, everybody's kind of in the same situation, but it is a good idea to start reaching out to insurance providers and just give them a heads up that you may be filing a claim or maybe considering a claim. So there's the business disruption and interruption. There's also contingent business disruptions, which you may be able to file a claim for suppliers if there are supply chain disruptions that are going to cause like a substantial impact on your business. And then, as Matt mentioned, thinking about the event coming up in June, there are certain types of policies that could be event cancellation policies. So that may apply to some of the people that you're working with or to what you're doing as well. And then kind of the biggest, like most immediate concerns, I think, for what's happening is with employment. In particular, on Wednesday, March 18th, the federal government passed this Family First Coronavirus Response Act, which has made some immediate amendments to the Family Medical Leave Act, which applies particular forms of emergency sick leave and emergency family care leave, which for kind of depending on the circumstances of your business, number of employees, and the particular reasons why a person may not be able to work, whether it's working physically at the location or working remotely, if there are illnesses or kind of family concerns that prevent people from telecommuting or from working in general, there are federal funds that are going to support businesses supporting their employees with paid family leave. Again, lots of specifics in the details, and if you do have individual questions about that, like the attorneys at Dunkiel Saunders have been working pretty tirelessly to get up to speed on these changes and with our clients as they're kind of looking at what they need to be doing in the next days and weeks. Other considerations that go beyond the Family Medical Leave Act with considerations of shutting down businesses entirely or doing layoffs or furloughs. There are generally some kind of like waiting periods that are in the law, but in emergency situations, those waiting periods may be waived. If you have over a certain number of employees or under a certain number of employees, that would change. There are also considerations with unionized employees and adjustments, kind of rapid adjustments to those collective bargaining agreements. In large part, I think a lot of it is just being able to kind of think through what the implications are and doing so in ways that will really prevent any form of discrimination that would kind of get an employer in trouble from other kind of very important federal laws that are also in place. Vermont also has state versions of these, and the resource that we're going to put together will compile information that touches on both federal and Vermont implications. Let's see, I think the last kind of important part to keep in mind is that for ongoing and continuous operations, OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Act, has some implications to consider in terms of asking employees to work in places where they may be impacted by other people who have symptoms or have already been infected with this virus. In large part, if one of your employees or someone you're working with does contract coronavirus, they will have to work from home or leave the workplace. They would apply for these Family Medical Leave Act amendments. But it's quite important to note that you'd have to tell the other employees that they've been working with or around so that they could take their own self precautions. But for privacy reasons, you wouldn't want to state the name of the person, because it's really important to protect people's privacy, particularly around their health and well-being. So that's kind of the very, very broad overview. I don't know, Mark, if you want to add anything to that list, and we're happy to field some questions as well.
No, I think that covers it, because I think we're going to be facing these issues both in our own businesses and, in our case with our clients, because people are going to be facing challenges such as, well, whether somebody gets ill or a family member gets ill, or just the disruption, as we've seen with schools closing, daycares closing. It impacts all of us as families, and it changes your ability to work. And so some of these things are going to be helpful. It's just going to be a matter of how to implement these obligations and comply with the law.
Yeah, I should also add that as any kind of legal and employment law requirement, you need to do postings and disclosures. And so one thing that businesses who probably have brick and mortar facilities don't think about is that now that they're transitioning to remote staff, they need to also have some kind of place where these postings from the EEOC can be made available to their employees, including within 15 days of when the new Family Medical Leave Act gets effective or is effective. It's 15 days. Sorry, I'm going to clarify that. The act was enacted on Wednesday, and then it has a 15-day period for when it needs to go into effect. And once it goes into effect, employers have 8 days to post the new laws, make that available to their employees in some way. Given the circumstances, it could be as easy as sending an email.
Well, thank you for all of that, Nico. That's very comprehensive and useful. So I have one question on some of this, and then others do as well. But one question I had was around the paid sick leave, paid family leave. I've been trying to read up on it, and my sort of understanding is that it's set up to reimburse the employer kind of through a payroll tax credit. So essentially, they don't need to pay payroll tax on the employer side for a while. And I'm wondering if that understanding is correct, and if also kind of from especially small employers' perspectives, or perspective that if that means there's going to be some lag time between when they need to sort of expend the resources and they get sort of compensated, and if there's any sort of vulnerability for those types of businesses in that lag time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very important question. It is the way that the new law is written, there will be an availability for 100% reimbursement through these payroll tax credits. They will be available quarterly, clearly when taxes are filed. And so that might create some burden on especially smaller businesses to be able to cover those expenses in the short term. I think that, you know, this phone call is quite valuable because some of our lending friends here might be able to take that into consideration with whatever rates or emergency funds they put together, particularly for these smaller businesses. The way that the Family Leave Act amendments have been set up is that there are two categories. Really, one is for emergency paid family leave, which is for caregivers of other people. The other is a personal emergency sick leave. Then there are particular categories in that personal sick leave, which include what could be viewed as caregiving, such as if your child is not in school anymore and you need to be able to attend to your children, that counts for that personal sick leave. If it's your mother, cousin, brother who's sick and you need to be a caregiver for them, that would fall into the other bucket of the family sick leave. And those clarifications are going to be made more kind of aware to all of us once the regulations are put in place, which I believe like the EEOC is working on as we speak, or the Department of Labor is working on as we speak. I'll say too that the emergency sick leave is available immediately for people. So by that I mean if you hired someone on Friday and they have to take sick leave, they're eligible for that. The family leave requires a period of at least 30 days of employment before the person could become eligible for that. There are also size limits. So the emergency sick leave, the one that's available immediately, that is applies to businesses with fewer than 500 employees. So 0, 1, well, I guess you'd say like 2, right? You'd be the owner and you would have an employee, or you'd both be owners if it's a worker-owned cooperative. In that case, you'd have 5. Anyways, technicalities. But any amount of employees up to 499, that would be available immediately. And there is an exception that a small business could say, like if it's an extreme burden, and the specific language is that the imposition of such requirement would jeopardize the viability of the business as a going concern. That hasn't been defined. As Mark said, there will probably be legal questions and disputes about that for a while now. The second provision, the family leave one, is currently set to be eligible to employees that have less than 500 people, but it's looking very much like that one will, based on regulations, will be set at 50 to 500. So it won't apply to businesses that are smaller than 50 employees. But we'll see as the law changes. That was a long-winded answer to your question.
No, that was very helpful. Thank you.
I'm like also not sure if I should have actually been taking notes just because I'm not a lawyer. So if you don't want to review these or add any additional edits to them, please feel free.
Okay. As I said, we're going to talk about how to make this information available. So early next week is like one of the things on our agenda.
Other questions for Nico?
Or Mark?
Or Mark, yes. All right. Well, hearing none.
This is
go ahead,
Kevin. Just sorry, just a quick question. I heard today that officially the tax date was moved. Any idea if that would apply for business taxes as well? Assume it would, but.
So I'm not a tax attorney, but I did read the news that it is for individual filers only, that June 15th date.
Okay.
Cool. Any other questions for Nico? I guess the one other one I had was just, and I think it does, but I just wanted to sort of like to ask. But this applies to you know, employers that already have existing sick time programs, right? So it would be, you know, in that, like, you know, they can be reimbursed for up to 14 days of sick time, or is it only like newly created sick time?
Yeah, that's another great question. So it applies to any employee, whether the employer has a paid leave or not. Employees that have any kind of accrued or have a system of paid leave are not required to use that first. This emergency relief is available immediately and can be used in conjunction with it.
Great, that's very helpful to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, anything else on this?
I think I just want to mention one other thing that's is that part of this amendments also changed some eligibility for unemployment. Unemployment for a while now has always had a work requirement. Not always, but it's become a more stringent work requirement over the years, which means that there has to be some kind of effort shown that the employee or the recipient of the unemployment benefits is actively seeking employment. And this emergency plan at this moment has a 10-week grace period. So if you are in the position, if an employer is in the position of thinking about like mass layoffs, there can be kind of a 10-week grace period where the employees can stay at home and receive unemployment benefits without having that obligation of actively seeking other employment.
I realized I do have a question as well on that unemployment piece that I'm sorry that I don't fully understand even my question maybe, but Carolyn, I mentioned our co-op coach has been researching about work share programs in other New England states and hasn't had information about Vermont. So her note says it lets a business reduce hours for all workers or all in a given division and have unemployment insurance benefits fill in the gap. Unlike regular unemployment, the business has to initiate the claim, not the worker. Right? Is there a work share program in Vermont, or is what I'm saying making sense?
Yeah, I think here, like what we've been, I mean, if I say we as the attorneys at Dunkiel Saunders this week have been working with employers on kind of preparing for furlong packages, which essentially does that same thing of a pretty reduced load. There are certain things to be mindful of, whether it's an exempt employee or a non-exempt employee. And those kind of details get into really fact-specific analyses of what the person's job roles and responsibilities are. Some people might call them like blue collar or white collar. I think that's pretty offensive. So I think, I don't know, personally, it's whether it's like an administrative role would be non-exempt and or whether someone's an wage and hour person. Those kind of adjustments would impact whether they are able to receive those unemployment benefits in that way.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
All right, anything else on this one before we move on to kind of relief grant fund?
Yeah, it's Kevin here. Sorry, I've got another quick one. If Vermont ends up following the trail that California, Pennsylvania, and presumably New York is blazing and requires people to stay at home for 2 to 3 weeks, possibly longer, what do any of these provisions kick in potentially to help the employer? Would employees immediately qualify for unemployment, or would they not? Or would there be I don't know. Is there anything to shelter or help protect the employer in that case?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question, and it's one we've been working on this week. And I would just say yes. Those provisions can really help employers at this time, especially if it's something like a 2 or 3 week period. Again, that goes back to the statement I made earlier about discrimination. So if you are looking at doing some layoffs, that it needs to be done in a strategic and non-discriminatory way, and that's something that we can support you with.
But we're hoping not to lay people off, right? But if we're not allowed to work, would people qualify for unemployment for that duration?
So I'm not sure I want to go into a very specific answer, because I don't want to be giving legal advice to your business particularly, but I will. I mean, in this conversation where it's being recorded on online call, but I will say, hypothetically speaking, employers can be considering layoffs as an option for these temporary periods of time where employees would be reinstated when the circumstances change. And those layoffs would provide eligibility, like would put the employee in a position where they would become eligible for unemployment benefits.
Right.
And that would go into effect immediately.
And it seems like the fact that those employees, that there's that 10-week period that you mentioned, that they aren't required to search for other work, gives some flexibility for employers to say, okay, well, the goal is to have you come back and to not sort of like lose the cohesion of the workforce necessarily in the same way that it would have been otherwise, right?
Yes, that's one of the benefits for the employer. Is the hope is that you just are able to get your workforce back, as opposed to people being obligated to search for other work, and then you'd be potentially losing people.
We have
that is a temporary time frame. We all hope.
We have 2 people who typically in the winter, when first quarter, when our work slows down, we offer people the opportunity of our field crews to take a 10-week layoff, because in normal times, if you have a callback date, you get 10 weeks where you don't have to go out and search for work because your employer is guaranteeing you a job after 10 weeks. So we have a couple of people who are already on and about to finish their 10 weeks. Do you imagine that they would get automatically another 10 weeks because of this emergency declaration?
I think I'm not in a position to answer that without doing a little bit more research.
Yeah, a little bit complicated.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else for Nico here?
Or Mark.
Or Mark. All right. Well, thank you so much, Nico. That was some really rich, useful information that's cleared some things that have been floating in my head in a vague way.
I'm so sorry. I realized I just went way past I was like, oh, 5-minute update will be fine.
Oh, no. This is what we needed to hear for sure.
Okay.
I want to just ask one more question too, which is mostly just that when if we have borrowers or other co-ops who have questions, is there a best way to pass your referral information onto them? Because I'm not going to be able to repeat all of this information, if and as they've got particular situations. Is there a best way to connect them with you?
Yeah, well, they can get in touch with us at Dunkiel Saunders, definitely. And as I mentioned, we're going to put together like a more kind of market-ready resource material that we'll be able to provide soon.
Great, thank you.
Cool. All right, and I'll just throw out real quick, we're almost at the hour, but for the kind of relief grant fund thing, as I mentioned in the email, I had sort of put some legwork into trying to put together this basically transparent kind of platform that you can both have money go in, have money go out. You see where it's going through Open Collective. With the intention of it being something that would provide small grants for co-op development. I was gonna probably try to roll it out in April or May. For that purpose, it seems like things are, given the situation, it makes sense to nudge it forward sooner and have it be more oriented towards sort of like relief supporting co-ops initially as needed. I'm gonna sort of send it around more broadly, but just so I'm gonna just cast for just a second, or screen share for just a second, so folks can kind of see what it is, or what it looks like. So basically, it is, it looks like, there's a page. People make contributions to the page. You can see sort of how much is in the kitty, and then we'll use sort of just a simple participatory budgeting exercise to distribute the funds that go into this kitty. It's fiscally sponsored by CDI, so that the donations to it are tax deductible. And certainly I would look for feedback or thoughts as to if we pull some if we can pull together a few hundred to a few $1,000s in the next week or two. What the best kind of uses for that would be, the most high impact uses for that would be to support co-ops that are struggling. So just wanted to sort of share that this infrastructure is in place. At the very bottom of the page, there's an about section that has sort of the rules for the governance of the fund, right? So outlays have to be sort of in alignment with Cooperative Development Institute's mission as a 501 nonprofit. But I mean, that's very much in alignment with what this is trying to do. So I would certainly just kind of welcome any feedback or thoughts about how to useful ways to distribute and outlay such this kind of thing. So
Matt, I have a question on that, because I could foresee people being interested in contributing potentially, but maybe not having capacity to participate in voting. I'm just curious if it's set up to actually receive donations without.
Yes, there's a category, there's membership, and then there's just a donation sort of category where people can just put money in and then not be involved in the decision making, or organizations as well. So yeah, so just if anyone has has any feedback or thoughts on how best to deploy that, I'm going to send it out kind of more broadly among the community in the coming week or so. But figured I would throw it out there first. So we're at 5. We're at 5. So I just maybe wanted to do a quick closing round. Any final thoughts from folks before we go, and throw out the question of do folks think it would make sense to try to pull together with a little bit more lead time, a second call in maybe a week to 2 weeks to try to update folks and figure out, kind of as the situation becomes more clear, figure out what are the sort of best next steps, or what are the things we need, resources we need to be making sure people are accessing, and that sort of thing.
I think it for sure would be great to do that.
Okay, so I'll sort of try to send out, along with to the list of folks who I sent the initial invitation to, I'll send the recording of this call and maybe like a doodle poll for the week after this coming week, so 2 weeks from now. Does that make sense? Or
I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense to do a doodle poll for 2 weeks out, just because of how rapidly things are changing. So you could set a date for 2 weeks out, or do a doodle poll for 2 days. I don't know, like that's my own personal take on things right now. But
so do you think maybe, if we were to say, 2 Fridays from now, similar kind of setup towards end of the day, just check in, see where things are at? Does that sound reasonable?
I think that makes sense. Just go ahead and set it, and people will come if they can. Keep the rhythm.
Yep, that makes sense. All right, so I will push that out along with the video. Yeah, any final thoughts from Kevin? Maybe if you want to go first.
No, I think it's a great idea to try and do this again in 2 weeks. Sounds about right. that said, you know, who knows where we'll be in 2 weeks. Let's hope for the best. I've found over the last couple of weeks my optimistic tendency to be challenged, and I'm trying to work on that. That's somebody made the comment, "Oh, when the optimist is worried, watch out." But we're going to do our best. We're going to stick around, and I liked, you know, depending on where things are in 2 weeks, I liked your note in the invite about this, about just, you know, let's think ahead and think about how things are going to be different, and how you know, maybe the spirit of cooperation that gets our society through this can be leveraged into you know, the betterment of the cooperative movement. I think there's going to be great opportunities there once we're on the other side of this.
Thank you, Kevin, and I see the optimist peeking through. Simeon, you want to go next? Oh, you're muted, Simeon.
Yep, I think, yeah. So I don't know if you can hear in the background, there's children laughter going on, which is one of the benefits of working from home and having children at home too. Definitely so much uncertainty, so much disruption going on right now in terms of, you know, best laid plans, best laid programs, work and development, just having to take a really sharp turn. And appreciate the forethought of getting together to see how we can kind of triage and work to maintain. And I guess, you know, I heard it a lot in terms of just stability at this point of the cooperative movement, of the businesses, but definitely interested in longer range thinking when we can get to it around how to respond to, you know, I mean, we're diving into our Amazon account to get stuff to our house. We're diving into all those platform monopolies because of the situation we're in, and ways that you know, we can keep to developing the strength of the cooperative movement throughout this is really important. So just appreciative.
Thanks. Nico, final thoughts?
I don't know at the moment. I guess I'm really feeling very grateful to have good and interesting work to do, and I appreciate that it can be of service to such an important community. My like long background has been deeply steeped in cooperatives, particularly in natural food retail cooperatives, and I'm very concerned about my friends and colleagues that work in that field, as just being really susceptible and high impact areas. So we'll see how the world changes. One of the positive things, as you said, kids, for me, it's just staying really in close contact with my family over video chats, and I'm working on a book club too. So there's tons of like joyful moments in these really uncertain times too, and happy to be of service.
Thank you. Lane?
I don't have a whole lot to add from what other folks have shared. I'm gonna drop a link to a poem into the notes that's been really helping me out. It's called Wash Your Hands by Dory Midnight. It's really good.
Thank you. I'll give that a gander as soon as this get off. Mark, final thoughts?
I'd say that I think, you know, scheduling a call 2 weeks out, we may find ourselves in very, very different circumstances by then. So I think we remain open to, you know, talking again sooner if, you know, depending on how things play out. We may just want to be looking for somebody else to talk to by next Friday. And just, especially if anybody has any positive thoughts. You know, Lane has some more optimistic poems, but I'd be, you know, happy to hear them by next week. But you know, as Nico had said, we're going to be pulling information together, and we're happy to share that through Matt, and you know, always it's a good source to to distribute to many people and anybody that it could help.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just say, this has been one of those things where things have changed so fast, and it's definitely been moments of feeling totally overwhelmed. And but the sort of, for me at least, the opportunity to try to kind of like chip at it in the ways that I have some level of agency is kind of what's helping keep me together in all of this. And so I appreciate you all kind of bringing that same spirit to this conversation today. That we've got a lot of work and a lot of like rethinking of things big and small that's already happening and is going to keep happening. I'm watching my partner is a teacher, and as they sort of like try to reinvent the education system in like a couple of days to be like fully online, it's just everyone's spinning as hard as they can to try to make this thing work. So I'm appreciative to have all of you on that team, trying to make sure that a just and better world kind of is in sight and maybe in reach. So all right, well, if I don't chat before 2 weeks from now, look forward to that conversation, and y'all have a great weekend.
Thank you, Matt.